Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. For privacy reasons, the names and locations in this story have been changed. However, these are real-life confessions shared by real people. Now, let's dive into today's shocking story.
Hi, I am Ryan Carter. I was 22, fresh out of college, and full of ambition. Armed with a degree in business administration, I was convinced that landing a job would be easy. After all, I had worked hard for 4 years, aced my exams, and even interned at a small firm during my final semester. But reality hit me like a freight train. The job market was brutal. Every company wanted experience, and every interview seemed to end with the same dreaded words: "We'll get back to you." Months passed, and the rejection emails piled up. My confidence started to waver. Was I not good enough? Had I chosen the wrong career path? Then, one evening, I got an email from Summit Enterprises, a mid-sized but fast-growing tech company. It wasn't a job offer, but an internship opportunity. Unpaid, temporary, with no guarantee of a full-time position. But at that point, I didn't care. I needed to get my foot in the door somewhere. My first day at Summit was overwhelming. The office was a whirlwind of activity. Employees in suits carrying laptops, heated discussions in glass-walled conference rooms, the hum of keyboards clicking away. And there I was, the newest intern, standing awkwardly by the reception desk in my budget-friendly business attire, gripping my notebook like a lifeline. I was introduced to my supervisor, Linda, a no-nonsense woman in her late 30s, who barely looked up from her laptop as she handed me a list of tasks. "You'll be assisting different departments as needed," she said. "For now, just focus on learning the ropes." Learning the ropes, as I soon found out, meant handling the grunt work. My first week was filled with coffee runs, organizing files, making copies, and answering phones. It wasn't glamorous, but I told myself that everyone had to start somewhere. What I didn't realize then was that this internship would be the beginning of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. The first few weeks at the Summit Enterprise felt more like a test of endurance than an internship. My daily routine consisted of fetching coffee, organizing meeting schedules, and handling minor administrative tasks. I knew interns had to start at the bottom, but I hadn't expected to feel so invisible. No one asked for my opinions, no one cared about my education, and the senior employees barely acknowledged my existence beyond their next coffee order. At first, I resented it. I hadn't worked so hard in college to be a glorified errand runner. But then I had a realization. What if this was my chance to stand out? If all they expected from me was coffee, I'd make it the best damn coffee run they'd ever seen. I started memorizing orders, learning who preferred black coffee, oat milk, or an extra shot of espresso. Anticipated needs before they asked, stocked extra supplies in the break room, and made sure every meeting was set up perfectly. It didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as I placed a cup of exactly how he liked it coffee on Mr. Daniel's desk, one of the company's top executives, he looked up from his laptop. "You always get this right," he said, more to himself than to me. Then he added, "What's your name again?" That was the moment I knew I had caught someone important's attention, and I was just getting started. A week after Mr. Daniels acknowledged my existence, something changed. It wasn't a grand promotion or a sudden shift in responsibilities, but I started noticing small things. People began remembering my name. Some employees who barely glanced at me before now, nodded in recognition. And most importantly, I was given more than just coffee runs. One morning, Linda, my supervisor, handed me a stack of reports. "Take these to the finance department and make sure they get the numbers right before the meeting at 2 p.m., she said. "Oh, and double-check the calculations. We can't afford mistakes." It was a simple task, but it was the first time I was trusted with something that actually mattered. I spent my lunch break at my desk, reviewing every line in the reports. At first glance, everything looked fine, but something nagged at me. One of the revenue figures seemed off. I ran the numbers again and again. Then it hit me. A miscalculation in projected costs. It was subtle, but if presented in the meeting, it could have thrown off the entire quarter's forecast. I hesitated. Should I say something? I was just an intern. If I pointed out an error and I was wrong, I'd look foolish. But if I was right, I took a deep breath and went to Linda. I think there's a mistake in the revenue projection, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She frowned and grabbed the report from my hands. Then she looked up. Good catch. Those two words meant more to me than any praise I had ever received. Later that afternoon, as I watched the finance team make adjustments before the meeting, I realized something. I wasn't invisible anymore. And soon, I'd prove I was worth much more than just an intern. After catching the mistake in the revenue projection, I sensed a shift. People started noticing me. Linda, who once barely acknowledged my presence, now asked me to double-check reports before meetings. The finance team, previously indifferent, began consulting me for quick verifications. It wasn't a promotion, but it felt like one. Then came my first real challenge. One Friday afternoon, just as most employees were preparing to leave for the weekend, a major issue erupted. The marketing team had accidentally sent the wrong pricing data to a major client. If not fixed before Monday morning, the company could lose the deal. The problem? The entire senior management team had already left for the weekend. Chaos broke out. Marketing was blaming finance. Finance was blaming sales, and nobody knew how to fix the mess. I could have walked away. I wasn't responsible for it, but something inside me refused to ignore the situation. I walked up to the group of stressed-out employees. "So, what exactly is wrong?" They glanced at me. For a moment, no one took me seriously. Then, a marketing associate sighed. "The pricing structure we sent is off by 3%. The client will see it first thing Monday morning." "Do we have access to the correct data?" I asked. Someone from finance nodded. "Yes, but we need the director's approval to resend it." "Is there any way to reach him?" Silence. Then, someone muttered, "He's on a flight to Singapore." I thought for a moment. There had to be another way. That's when I remembered. Mr. Daniels. I had no idea if this was within his scope of authority, but he was the highest-ranking executive still in the building, so I took a risk. I knocked on his office door. He glanced up, surprised to see me. "What is it?" I explained the issue in the clearest, most professional way I could. Instead of dismissing me, he leaned forward, processing everything quickly. Then, he picked up his phone and called the director's assistant. Within minutes, approval was secured. The correct pricing data was sent, and the crisis was averted. As I left the office that evening, I felt something new. Respect. People who had ignored me before now thanked me. Some even clapped me on the back. I wasn't just the intern anymore. I had proven myself. After the pricing crisis, my confidence soared. I was no longer just another intern. I was becoming someone people relied on. But I had no idea that my biggest test was yet to come. It happened on a Monday morning, right before a crucial investors meeting. Daniels had been preparing for weeks, and this meeting could bring in millions for Summit Enterprises. The entire office was buzzing with anticipation. Then disaster struck. An hour before the presentation, the main conference room's projector crashed. The IT team scrambled to fix it, but nothing worked. Worse, the digital backup of the presentation was corrupted. Panic spread like wildfire. The CEO himself was furious. Mr. Daniels was unusually silent, gripping his pen so tightly I thought it might snap. Everyone was asking the same question. What do we do now? I wasn't supposed to be in that room. I was still an intern. But standing there, watching chaos unfold, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to fix this. I ran to my desk and grabbed my personal laptop. Over the past few weeks, I had been taking notes on every major project and deal, just to understand the company better. As luck would have it, I had seen the investor presentation before, and I had saved a rough draft on my laptop. Rushed back into the conference room and spoke up, louder than I ever had before. "I have a backup." Everyone turned to stare at me. The CEO frowned. "What?" Mr. Daniels was the first to react. "You have the slides?" I nodded. "A slightly older version, but I can update it in minutes." Without waiting for approval, I plugged my laptop into the backup projector. The IT team worked to get it running while I updated the slides as fast as my fingers could type. By the time the investors walked in, the presentation was ready. Mr. Daniels delivered it flawlessly. The investors were impressed, and by the end of the meeting, the CEO was shaking hands with them. The deal was secured. After the meeting, Mr. Daniels approached me. He didn't say much, but his words stuck with me. "You saved us today. That won't be forgotten." From that day on, my role at Summit changed forever. After the investor meeting, everything changed. People knew my name now. No longer just the intern, I was now the person who had saved a multi-million-dollar deal. The recognition didn't come immediately, but I could feel the shift. Colleagues started treating me differently. Instead of ignoring me or handing off menial tasks, they began asking for my input. Mr. Daniels, true to his word, didn't forget what I had done. A week after the crisis, he called me into his office. "How much longer is your internship?" he asked. "3 more months, I replied. He leaned back in his chair. "That's too long. We need you on payroll." Just like that, I was offered a now full-time position as a junior analyst. It wasn't the highest-ranking role, but for an intern with 0 experience, it was a massive leap. I had gone from running coffee errands to sitting in meetings with department heads, analyzing financial reports, and even assisting in decision-making. I threw myself into the work, learning at a pace that left even me surprised. Late nights at the office became the norm. I studied company reports, memorized Summit's financial history, and even started understanding the mind of Mr. Daniels. One night, while reviewing report for an upcoming project, I noticed something odd in the numbers. The Bipomamen's sales forecasts for one of our key products seemed overly optimistic. If left unchecked, it could lead to a massive revenue shortfall. So, I hesitated. It wasn't my job to challenge projections, but something told me this was important. The next morning, I walked straight into Mr. Daniels' office. "Sir, I think we have a problem." He raised an eyebrow but waved for me to continue. I laid out my findings: the unrealistic sales numbers, the flawed growth projections, and the potential financial risk. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then, instead of dismissing me, he smiled. "Good catch. Let's fix this before it becomes an issue." That was the day I realized I wasn't just rising through the ranks. I was becoming a trusted part of Summit's future. With each passing month, my responsibilities grew. I was no longer just an analyst. I was a decision maker. Mr. Daniels had started mentoring me directly, pulling me into strategy meetings, involving me in critical business decisions, and testing my ability to think under pressure. Then, the biggest test of my career arrived. Summit Enterprises was negotiating a high-stakes merger with a smaller but highly innovative tech company. The deal could catapult Summit into the big leagues, giving us access to cutting-edge technology and a wider market. However, the merger was far from smooth. The company we were acquiring had serious financial instability, and many board members feared that absorbing them could now drain our resources. A week before the final decision, Mr. Daniels pulled me aside. "I want your opinion," he said, sliding a thick folder toward me. Inside were open financial reports, market analyses, and risk assessments. The fate of the deal depended on what was inside. I stayed up for 3 nights straight, poring over the numbers, running projections, and studying market trends. The data told a conflicting story. The risk was real, but the potential reward was massive. When the day of the final decision arrived, I was asked to present my findings to the board. I took a deep breath and walked into the boardroom, facing now a table full of executives, many of whom had barely acknowledged me before. I laid out my case, the risk factors, and how we could mitigate them, the long-term potential for revenue growth, why this deal was necessary for Summit's expansion. When I finished, there was silence. Then, Mr. Daniels nodded. "I agree." The deal went through, and 6 months later, Summit soared past its competitors, securing its place as a market leader. A few days after the deal closed, Mr. Daniels called me into his office again, but this time, his tone was different. "I'm stepping down as CEO," he said, "and I want you to take my place." I felt my breath catch. "Me? The former coffee runner?" He smiled, as if reading my thoughts. "You've earned it." At that moment, I realized this wasn't just a promotion. It was the final step in a journey that started with an unpaid internship. Standing in my new office, overlooking the city skyline, I thought back to the nervous, inexperienced intern I had once been. The key lessons I have learned. Start small. Dream big. Every big achievement begins with small steps. Don't underestimate the value of entry-level roles. They're the foundation for future success. Embrace challenges. The road to the top is never easy, but every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Find mentors. Surround yourself with people who believe in you and are willing to guide you. Believe in yourself. Self-doubt is inevitable, but confidence in your abilities is what will carry you through. Everything I had learned, the struggles, the setbacks, the lessons, had led me here. I picked up the gold-plated nameplate on my desk. It read, "To Ryan Carter, Chief Executive Officer, The Summit Enterprises." A smile formed on my lips. The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning.
If you enjoyed this insane story, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking confessions. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.